We begin today the Mishnah on Daf Chav Dalid Amid Aleph. Sagt Heilige Mishnah, Ha'isha shenodra benazir. Woman accepted upon herself Naziris. Ve'frisha is behemta, and she separated the behemah for the conclusion of her Naziris. In the conclusion of the Naziris, you have to bring a chatas, an oila, and a shlamim. So she separated the behemahs for the carbon already. Then her husband heard about this and nullified her Naziros. So what happens now? Does she have to bring those karbanas? Does she not? She definitely doesn't have to bring those karbanas. But what happens to these behemoths? So im shaloi haisa behemah. If she went and she used her husband's animals to separate for her karbanas, what is she thinking doing this? Why is she taking her husband's animals to separate for karbanas? Okay, so there's going to be a discussion about this in the Gemara, that it's actually possible that her husband is obligated to give her from his animals for her karbanas. So she took her husband's animals for these karbanas. But now that he nullified her Naziris, so Teitze v'tire be'ede, the animals go out and they graze amongst the rest of the animals. In other words, they are not at all kachim. The whole thing is that she didn't have the right to take it from the husband, basically, as the Gemara will explain. So therefore, they just go back out to become chulin. If she took from her own animals and she separated it for the karbanis, so then hachatas tomos, the carbon chatas that was separated, so that has to be left to die. It does not become chulin again. And v'oila tikrav, and the oila you have to be makriv the carbon oila. Okay. You read it together. Sorry. V'oila tikrav oila, the carbon oila will be brought as an oila, and shlamim tikrav shlamim, and the shlamim will be brought as a shlamim. Once she separated this, so it's they do have to be brought as karbanis already. Okay, the Gemara already spoke about this earlier. The Gemara explained that the Gemara had discussed before. What does this mean when a husband nullifies the neder? Whether he nullifies it retroactively, whether he nullifies the neder going from here forward. The Gemara wanted to say that the simple pshat of our Mishnah is, you see from here that a husband nullifies it only going forward, and therefore she still has to bring these karbanis. Okay, the Gemara discussed this already before on Daf Chof Aleph. Here the Gemara will discuss something else. The point that you see over here is there's a distinction between her using her husband's animals or her using her own. She used her husband's, so then it's nothing. Now it all becomes chulin. But if she used her own, so then she has to bring these karbanis. Chatas has to be left to die. If you remember, again, we learned before, a carbon chatas that has no owner that has to bring the carbon, or in this case, she's not a Nazir anymore. So the carbon chatas can't be brought. That's a halacha l'Moshe Misinai regarding a chatas that has to be left to die. Okay, but now the Mishnah, when it says shlamim tikrav shlamim, the shlamim has to be brought as a shlamim. V'nachalin liyoim echad. But now this shlamim, it's not being brought as a shlamim for a Nazir, right? The oila, when it says here oila tikrav oila, it doesn't mean it's being brought as an oila for the Nazirus, because she's not a Nazir anymore. When it says the oila is being brought as an oila, that means an oila could be brought as a gift, a dairon. The Gemara before used the expression, you bring as a gift to the Eibishter. So this oila that was already dedicated as an oila, it's brought as an oila, but it's not Nazirus. Same thing with the shlamim. When the shlamim is brought as the shlamim, it's not being brought as the shlamim for the Nazirus. A shlamim could also be brought as a stam shlamim. So therefore, the Mishnah says, you bring it as a shlamim, v'nachalin liyaim echad. The carbon shlamim will only be allowed to be eaten on that day that the carbon is brought, and the following night. Right, so the chiddush over here is, a usual shlamim, we say this every day before davening, the karbanis, a usual shlamim can be eaten for 2 days. Shnei yomim v'layla echad. But a carbon nazir, the shlamim could only be eaten 1 day and a night. So even though here you're not really bringing it anymore as a shlamim for a nazir, but because it was originally dedicated as a nazir, so you could only eat it for 1 day and a night. But on the other hand, ve'enon tunin lechem, the breads that come along with the carbon shlamim by a nazir, we're going to learn about this later in the Masechta. There was 40 different breads that were brought along. Over here though, because it's not being brought with a nazir, so therefore it does not. You don't need the lechem. Okay, so this is all talking about if she dedicated the actual animals for the karbanis. If she had money that she dedicated for her karbanis and there was stumen. Stumen means it wasn't specified which money is going to be used for the oila, which for the chatas, and which for the shlamim. It's money that she dedicated for all the karbanis. So yiplu l'nedava. So all that money should become an nedava, it's a donation for the karbanis in the Beis HaMikdash. And you bring other karbanis with them. Mais mufurashin, but if the money that she dedicated for her karbanis, so they were already she specified this money is for the chatas, this for the oila, this for the shlamim. The mei chatas, the money of the chatas, yelchol liyam hamelach. That money, similar to the animal itself, where the halacha l'meish mesina is, it has to be left to die. The money of this karban chatas also has to be disposed of. You have to take it and throw it into the yam hamelach. Now loy this is money which is hektish. You're not allowed to have a na from it. But if you do though, you're not over on me'ilah. Me'ilah is when you misuse hektish, and there's all kinds of halachas that apply. But over here, because this is money that can't be used to actually be brought on the mizbeach, so therefore the halachas of me'ilah don't apply. Demei ayla, now the money that was specified as an ayla, yaviu ayla, they should be used to bring a carbon ayla on the base of mikdash. They are money for a carbon, and it's going to be used for an actual carbon, so there is mila that applies here. The mei shlamim, the money that was specified that it's going to be used for the shlamim. So yaviu shlamim, you bring from it a carbon shlamim. There is no meila for this money of the shlamim. The b'chlal by shlamim, the halacha always is that there's no meila until after zrikas adam. So there's no meila here. So you're going to use this money to bring the shlamim. V'nechalin l'yayim echad. And, like the Mishnah already said before, this carbon is going to be different than a regular shlam. Because it was originally dedicated for a Nazir, so you can eat it for one day, like a Nazir. But you don't have to bring along with it the breads that have to be brought for a regular Nazir. Okay, so the Gemara here will focus on the first din of the Mishnah, where it spoke about the wife that went and took from her husband's animals for this carbon. So the Gemara...
and cover is the same thing.
Yeah, chayra is the same thing. Yeah, and the Mishnah doesn't say no, but the Mishnah didn't give the example of behemoths, of karbanis that are stumen.
Yeah,
didn't give that example. It spoke about the mois. By the mois, it made a difference if it's stumen or mefurashin. So the Gemara man tane the baal loy mishtabedla. Who's the tana of our Mishnah that's saying that she took his animals for the carbon, and now the husband nullified it? So what happens? All those animals are chulin. They can just go back with the rest of the animals. Who is the Tana of a Mishnah? So it seems like the basis of what the Tana of the Mishnah is saying is that the husband has no obligation to provide for her animals that she has to bring for a carbon. And therefore now these animals go back, they're totally chulin. Who is this Tana? Rav Chisda Rabbanan. Says Rav Chisda, this goes according to the Rabbanan. As the Gemara here is going to explain. If this would be going according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, why should these animals now go out and graze together with the rest of the animals? He's mishubid. He has an obligation to provide for her the karbanis that she has to bring for whatever she's obligated to bring. Where is this machlokes? The Tanya, we learned in the Braisa that Rabbi Yehuda says, Adam Maybe carbon ashir al ishtay. Okay, so this is a halacha. This is a carbon that's called a carbon oila v'yared. Why is it called oila v'yared? Because there's a different kind of carbon that you bring if you're rich or if you're poor. If you're rich, you bring an animal. If you're poor, you bring a bird, or maybe even you bring a carbon mincha from flour. What happens if a person's wife is obligated to bring a carbon? She's poor. She doesn't have any of her own money. But the husband is very rich. So what level carbon does she bring? Does she bring a carbon of her own level or her husband's level, which is rich? So Rabbi Yehuda says, Adam maybe carbon asher al ishtai, that the husband will have to provide and bring the carbon on his level, and he's rich, for his wife. V'chein, and it's not only in this scenario, but this is b'chlal true. Kol karbanisel shehi chayeves, all karbanis that his wife is chayev, the husband has to provide the animals for her to be able to bring her karbanis. Shekach kasavla. This is what the husband writes to his wife in the ksubah. Kol achrayis is the isla chalai, all things that I'm responsible for you, everything that the husband has to give her and provide for her. And it says there, min kadmas dna, even from before our marriage, any money that you owed, any chiyuvim, any responsibilities you have, I'm going to take care of. So therefore, the husband has to provide for his wife everything, including if she has an obligation to bring a carbon. From where should she bring a carbon? She's not expected to have any of her own possessions, of her own animals. Whatever she owns goes to the husband. So therefore the husband takes responsibility to provide everything for her, including her karbanis. Okay, so that's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Now, the Rabbanan argue on this. The Rabbanan disagree. The Rabbanan say that a husband does not have to provide for his wife the karbanis. So what the Gemara is saying is, our Mishnah that says that she went and she used her husband's animals to dedicate for these karbanis of her naziris, and then the husband nullified this. So those animals' dedication was all worthless, and the animals go back out to chulin. It's because we're following the Rabbanan, that the husband does not have this obligation to provide for her karbanis. So Rava says, no. Not necessarily. You don't have to say that our Mishnah is only like the Rabbana. Filatayme, Rabbi Yehuda. I can tell you our Mishnah goes like the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda that a husband does provide the animals that his wife needs for karbanis. But ki mishabed law. When is that husband's obligation? When is he subjugated? When does he have to give it to her? B'milsa d'tzricha law. This is something that she needs, that she's obligated to bring. B'milsa d'loy tzricha law. But if it's something that she's not obligated, loy. For that, the husband does not have obligation to give for her. Over here, what are we talking about in our Mishnah? It turns out that she has no obligation to bring these karbanis of naziris. The husband nullified her naziris. So once the husband nullifies it, so she has no obligation to bring these karbanis. Now it turns out that these karbanis, these animals that she used that belong to her husband, for these karbanis, she has no right to take them, b'chlal. So therefore, she had no right, so they're not kachin, they become chulin again. If she had an obligation, yes, then she takes from the husband. But here, it turns out that there's no obligation.
So the word needed in this situation means that she
if she was actually a Nazir, and the husband validated that Nazirus, so then she needs to bring this karbanis, so she takes from her husband. But over here, the husband nullified it. So Rabbi Yehuda will agree that she doesn't get anything.
If the husband made a nether, Nazirus, and he put aside karbanis, and then he was mated it.
For himself, you're saying?
Yeah. A little different the case in this.
Yeah, I understand.
The husband made a
yeah, and it was mat. It was mat.
And he put aside karbanis, and then he made a Torah.
No, it's different. It's different. True.
What will be the din?
Okay, uprooted the nether retroactively. L'chayr, if you uproot the nether retroactively over there, it might be different. You don't have to bring the karbanis. Over here, it's a different point. I understand what you're trying to ask. Over here, the point is the das of the husband. Okay, when the husband was mishabed himself in the ksubah, he wrote, "I'm going to take care of you for everything, including give you karbanis." The das of the husband to be mishabed himself to his wife in the ksubah, he never had in mind to include such things that she won't actually need in the end. Even though you're thinking, okay, but in the beginning she needed it. Now it turns out that she doesn't need it. True, but that's not part of what the husband is obligating him for. Anything that in the end of the day is loy tzricha, that now she doesn't need it anymore, the husband l'chadchila did not have in mind to give that to her. So it turns out she took something from him that he l'chadchila never obligated himself to give for her. So therefore it all goes back to chulin. But now there's another version of this entire discussion, and it goes basically the opposite. What did Rav Chisda say? Man Tana, who's the Tana of our Mishnah that said that if she takes from his karbanis, that now he nullified her naziris, so it goes out to chulin. Rav Chisda, Rabbi Yehuda. Our Mishnah is actually Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda is the one that says that a husband has to provide for his wife the karbanis. In our Mishnah, it's going according to Rabbi Yehuda. Why? The svara that we just said. Because when does the husband obligate himself to take care of his wife? Karbanis that she needs. That she needs. The things, the karbanis that she does not need, which is over here. He nullified her naziris. So it turns out she doesn't need them. So he never was mishabed himself for this. So she doesn't need it, so he wasn't mishabed. Okay, so therefore, that's exactly what our Mishnah is saying. Our Mishnah is making this distinction. What's the Mishnah saying over here? This halacha that the karbanis that she took from him become chulin is when, if the husband nullified the naziris. What if the husband did not nullify the naziris? Then she could take his karbanis. So this is going dafka according to Rabbi Yehuda. We make this distinction. But Rabbanan, if we're going to say this goes according to the opinion of the Rabbanan, what difference should there be whether he nullified the naziris, whether he did not nullify the naziris? Loi mishabed la klal. He's not mishubed. He doesn't have this obligation at all to provide for his wife any animals at all. So again, in our Mishnah, it's mashma that only in this situation, when the husband nullified the naziris, then the animals that she used from him are going to be chulin. But what if he did not nullify the naziris? Then she could take from the husband. But Rabbanan holds she could never take from the husband. So how could the Mishnah go according to the Rabbanan? So the Gemara now continues and says, so what are you going to say? Ve'ela, according to the Rabbanon, if she's taking any animals from the husband, how could that be? When is it, even according to the Rabbanon, that the husband's animals will be mishubet to her, going to Akni law? If the husband himself went and gave it to her as a gift and says, here, these are animals that are yours, if you ever have to bring a carbon, you can bring from here. It was maknit there. He sold it to her or gave it to her as a gift. Now, if so, if that's the only time, that's the only way how she can be using any animals from her husband, she got it from him as a gift, but v'kivin the akni law, havda nafsha. But once he gave it to her as a gift, so now it's hers. So if that's what our Mishnah is talking about, that the husband gave his wife his animals as a gift to use for her karbanis, because if he wouldn't give it to her as a gift, he's not obligated. So if it's given to her as a gift, so now even if he nullifies the Naziros and she uses the husband's animals that he gave to her as a gift, it should still be hektish because it was given to her as a gift. So you can't, in other words, the point of here is that according to the Rabbanan, Mimanav Shach, if it's the husband's animals, he's never obligated to give it to her. So why is our Mishnah saying only in a case when he nullified the Naziris? Elamai, we're talking about the animals that the husband gave his wife as a gift, so then it's hers already. So even if the Naziris was nullified, so the hektish should take effect, and it shouldn't just become chulin. That was the question here. So Adarabba, the Mishnah cannot be the Rabbanan. But on this the Gemara answers, Rava Omar, and then the Rava also again argued in Rav Chisda, and he said, Afilatei me Rabbanan. I can tell you our Mishnah goes according to the Rabbanan. And what's the Mishnah talking about? That the husband gave his wife animals as a gift to be used for karbanos that she needs. But kimakni lo nami, when the husband gives her these animals as a gift, what was his intention? He's not giving his wife stam animals as a gift. He's giving it to her with a certain purpose. B'milsa de tzricha. If it's a situation where she needs them for an obligation she has to bring for a carbon. B'milsa de loy tzricha lo, le makni lo. But if it's for something that she doesn't even need it, it turns out that she doesn't need these karbanos naziris because he nullified his naziris. For that purpose, he didn't intend to give it to her as a gift. This is a gift with a condition. So that's exactly what our Mishnah is saying. If she's an actual Nazir, she can take from her husband's animals that he gave her as a gift. But if it turns out she's not an actual Nazir, for this situation, it's not a gift. And therefore, the animals will be 100% chulin. So the Mishnah could go even according to the opinion of the Rabbanon. The next case of the Mishnah, it said, Imshallah hoisa behemta. If she has animals of her own that she was maktish for her karbanis, so then chatas tomos, the chatas is left to die. In va'ila tikrav, the carbon oil she can bring as a carbon. But the question is, he minala, she, the wife, from where did she have her own animals? Whatever she owns goes to the husband. Ha'amrit mashakansi shekana baila. Rav Papa answers, there's two options here. Either Rav Papa says shemiktsasa or shekimtsasa meisasa. She's being very stingy with her dough that she's baking to eat. Her husband has to provide for food. She provides for her to be able to buy dough, to bake bread. So what does she do? She takes off little by little, 10 cents a day or whatever it is, until she gets enough money to be able to buy animals for herself. So that's something that her husband gave her, and the husband is obligated to give it to her, to be hers for food. So she can take off for that and use for herself. Or we could say the case is here, the akni lo acher, somebody else gave her a gift, and said to her, I'm giving you this gift, that it should be yours, and it's only yours with the condition that your husband should not take possession over this. And you have the ability to do that. So that's what happened over here. Someone gave it to her with this condition. So she has animals of her own. Then the Mishnah said, Ha'ayla tikrav ayla va'ashlamim tikrav chulu. So the Gemara here is going to focus on the halacha of shlamim. That here you have the carbon shlamim of a Nazir that's being brought as a shlamim. It's not exactly like a Nazir though. Why? Because the Mishnah said, even though the time that you can eat it is only one day and a night, like a shlamim of a Nazir, but all the breads that have to be brought with the shlamim of a Nazir do not have to be brought here. So the Gemara is going to show that there's other cases where you have the same halacha. Amalei Shmuel la'avua bar ihi. So Shmuel said to him, avua bar ihi, so there's other here that are greatest in the Gemara. Okay, different gears because that's not clear who this was. Okay, Akapanim. Shmuel said to Avua bar ihi, leitesiv al karech, do not sit down, stand on your feet, the omrisli hadam ilsa, until you're going to tell me this concept. Why? So he was challenging him basically. He was telling me, I want you to tell me this concept. The Eluhain Arba Elim. Here there are 4 different examples of rams that are brought as a shlamim, and they were dedicated for a Nazir to be brought ayil. That's the ayil that's brought for a Nazir. But she'enan tu'unin lechem. Even though these are rams that were dedicated to be brought as a Nazir, but nevertheless, you're going to bring it as a shlamim without the breads. So what are 4 examples for this? And he gives them an outline what they are. Shaloi, vishalah, there's his, there's hers, vishalach. In other words, when we're talking here about a wife took from the husband's animals, she took from her own animals. Vishalachar hamisa, after the person that dedicated these animals for his naziris passed away. Vishalachar kapara. And after the person that dedicated these karbanas for his naziris already had his kapara brought for his naziris. Okay, these are the 4 cases. So the Gemara here spells out what these 4 cases are. Shalah hadamaran. The case of Shalah is the case that we just said. What is the case that we just said in the Mishnah? If she took from her own animals and she dedicated it to be brought for a naziris, and then what happened? The husband nullified her naziris, so the shlamim still has to be brought as a shlamim, but without the breads. That's the case of our Mishnah. That's the first case. Shaloi, the case of the husband or of the man. Ditnan, we learned in a Mishnah later. Ha'ish mader es benai. A father could make a neder that his son should be a nazir. As benai ben nazir, that his son will be a nazir. This is halacha l'moshe misinai, that a father could make his son a nazir. Ve'ein ha'ish mader es benai ben nazir. But a mother cannot accept a nazirus for the son. Oh, that's a question with no. Yeah, okay. So that will be. We'll discuss that when we get to that Gemara. Okay. Gilach oy shegulchu kroivim. What if he himself went and did not follow the naziris? He took a haircut anyways, or he has relatives that went and gave him a haircut. Micha, the son himself, did not accept the naziris. He protested against this naziris that his father took upon himself for his son. Or the relatives came and protested and said that they don't accept this naziris. So then what happens if this son, which was a nazir, because until he doesn't protest or until he doesn't keep his naziris, so he's a nazir, and now he dedicated a carbon for his naziris. If he had money that were dedicated for the carbonis, but they weren't specified which money is used for the carbon, for which carbon. Yiplu linedava. So this money, like it said in our Mishnah, all just becomes a donation to the Beis HaMikdash. Mais mufurashin, but if it's money that was already specified what's being used for what, Dmei chatas, like the Mishnah said, Dmei chatas, the money of the chatas yechol Yam HaMelach, that has to be disposed of in the Yam HaMelach. Dmei oila, the money of the oila, yaviu oila, that will be brought as an oila. Umaylim behem, and this because it's the money that's going to be used for a carbon, so meila applies. The mei shlamim, the money of the shlamim, yaviu shlamim, they're brought as a shlamim v'nechalon liyayim echad, and it can be eaten just for one day, and ve'enon tu'unin lechem. But you don't have to bring the bread anymore, because the son protested against this nazirus, he's not a nazir anymore, so therefore there's no bread of here. So this is the case of shaloi. So shaloi really means a father and a son. When the father made his son a nazir, then his son protested, so now, even if you have to bring the shlamim, but without lechem. That's the second case. A third case where you see you bring a shlamim without the breads, shala'ach hamisa. The person that dedicated this for his naziris passed away. I mean, how long? Where do we see this? The Tanya we learned in the Braisa, mafresh moisle nazirusai. Person dedicates his money for the karbanis of his naziris, loinenin v'loy moilim bem. You're not allowed to have anah from this money, but there's no meal in it either. Mipnei shehein ru'uyin lahavi bekulan shlamim. Because this money that was dedicated, if you didn't specify yet what it's going to be used for, maybe all of this money is going to be used just for a shlamim. It's going to bring a very big fat animal just for the shlamim, and then he's going to have to bring other money for the other 2 karbanis he has to bring, for an oil and a chatas. And I mentioned before, when it comes to a shlamim, there's no mi'ila by a shlamim until after the zrika of the dam. So therefore, the money dedicated, if it wasn't specified, there's no mi'ila. Now, meis, if this person passed away, so again, the same exact halacha applies. If the money that this person dedicated for his naziros, they were not specified, so yiplu nedava, we take that money and it all becomes a donation for the Beis HaMikdash. Mois mefurashin, but if the money was specified, the mechatas yelach li Yam HaMelach, you dispose of it in the Yam HaMelach. Loy nenem v'loy moilin, you're not allowed to have anah, but there's no me'ilah. You do have to bring an oila from it, and there is meila of it. And the mei shlamim, yaviu shlamim, v'nachal l'yom echad, and ve'enon tunin lechem. And you don't have to bring the breads. Once the owner passes away, so you have to bring it as a stam shlamim without the bread. So this is the third case where it's brought, this shlamim dedicated for Naziris is brought and only eaten one day, but without the breads. Now the final case is shala'acha kapara. Once the person already had a kapara, what happened over here? This person dedicated karbanis for his Naziris, and then the karbanis that he dedicated got lost. So he went and brought other karbanis. So he already got his kapara. And then those animals that he dedicated from before, he found them. So he already had his kapara. So in this case, the same halacha will apply. Svarahu, and the Gemara says, even though we don't have a Beferish Mishnah or Braisa that says it, but it's logical that it's the Shla'achar Misa, just like we said before. A person that dedicated his karbanis for his Naziris and then he passed away. My time, what's the reason why? It's brought, the Shlam is brought without the breads. Because now the person passed away, so it's not being used for a kapara. So after this person already brought his karbanis, so it's not being used for any kapara. So therefore it's going to be brought as a shlamim, but without the breads. The breads are only needed if it's taka being brought for the kapara of the Naziris. So those are the four cases. What asks on this, that's it. There's only these four cases where it's being brought as a shlamim without the breads. V'su leke, is there no other case? V'ha'ike, but we do have other cases. The Bachir adds, the Tani, Levi learned in the Braisa, V'shar kol shalmei nazir, sheshachton shaloi kimitzvasan. Any of the shlamim, the karbanis shlamim, that have to be brought for a nazir. If the Kaim brought it for this carbon, but he brought it shaloi kimitzvasan, meaning he didn't have the right kavana, that it's being brought for the purpose of, for the carbon of Naziris. It was brought shaloi kimitzvasan. I think that's what it means over here. The Taisus over here brings from Rashi Mesechtem and Nazir that it was shechted shaloi lishma. Okay, there's another pshat, but that's Rashi's pshat. So it was shechted shaloi lishma. What happens? Ksheidin. The actual carbon itself, this is b'chlal the halacha by karbanis. When you bring shaloi lishma, the carbon itself is kosher. But v'lo oilan labaylan l'shem chayva. But for the owner that had this obligation to bring the karbanis of his naziris, he did not fulfill his obligation. He's going to have to bring the carbon again. And what happens? So he said, that the Levi said, so now it has to be eaten like the shlamim of a naz only for one day. But the breads that would have to be brought together with the shlamim for the naz, you're not going to have to bring the breads anymore, because anyways, the owner is not fulfilling his obligation here. It was brought shaloi lishma. And also there's the halacha of the zroya. We'll learn later in the Masechta regarding the zroya of the carbon that has to be cooked. That also doesn't apply here. So here we see another case of a shlamim that's going to be brought, and you don't have to bring the breads with it. So why aren't we counting this as a fifth case? One answers that kimitzvasan, just actually go, not that you don't read kimitzvasan is part of the answer, I think, right? Kimitzvasan kachashiv, shalai kimitzvasan like kachashiv. The examples we gave before is all when a person is bringing the carbon according to the halacha that he's supposed to. Over here we're talking about a situation where it was brought shalai lishma. That's something which wasn't done properly. That's a case that we're not including in this list of four.